happening and are very much a part of the discussion for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as well as many other broadband projects, because IIJA is not the only broadband program out there, right? We know there's USDA's Reconnect and other broadband programs. There is the U.S. Department of Treasury's Capital Projects Fund, and of course, the Federal Communications Commission has its Universal Service Fund, Connect America Fund Round 2, and Rural Digital Opportunity Fund are part of that. So for those of you who just joined us, thank you for being with us. I'm just teeing up a couple of things. The immediate future, next week, we're going to be hearing from broadband mapping and data experts in the field who are focusing on it, whether that's the NTIA, the FCC, or private companies or states that are actively working to implement their own maps. We're going to be talking about these broadband mapping discussions and where broadband mapping stands. And then 2 weeks from today, and we had planned this for today, but we've moved it because so many of the people who were engaged in this discussion were at the Pew Trusts event that's happening today. We're covering it on Broadband Breakfast. Hope you'll tune in to Broadband Breakfast to see some of the reporting that we will be doing from the Pew event. But for those of you who are here, what I wanted to do is tee up the series that we're going to be doing for several weeks this summer, calling it Summer of Broadband. Okay, so here I am. I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia. I left Virginia this morning, and I've traveled through 4 states, I guess 5 if you count going in West Virginia, out at West Virginia, and back into West Virginia. But I'm here in Wheeling taking care of a couple of pit stop items on the road. I'm actually going to be out in the Mountain West for most of the summer. My oldest son is getting married next month, and so a lot of preparations for that. But we're going to be doing several events, Broadband Breakfast Live Online events from different state capitals we anticipate. So for example, we're going to be doing an event from Utah. We're going to be doing an event from, I hope, this is still in process, but I hope we'll be doing an event from Idaho, from Montana, and from Tennessee on the way back. And so what we're doing is we're basically trying to showcase the real important move of broadband discussions and deployment from the federal government to the states and to the localities, and that's really what we're trying to focus on at Broadband Breakfast. I know many of you tuned in last week. I was down in Tennessee at Fiber Connect, and we've actually had the chance to do this kind of take the show on the road several times thus far with different conferences. We were at Mountain Connect before Fiber Connect. We were at the Broadband Community Summit in Houston. We were at WISP America in New Orleans, and we were also at the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, at the very, very early part of the year. So really what I'm looking to do today is to talk about the role of the states, the state broadband offices that we're seeing. And again, because we are live, we have the opportunity for those of you who'd like to chime in our discussion. If you represent state offices, or if you work with a state office, or if you just have questions about a state office, feel free to raise your hand in the chat window, and we'll recognize you. What I'd like to take the time to do as we lead up to this is to review a couple of the latest developments that we're seeing from NTIA as we move towards the rollout of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So little over a month ago, the NTIA released the Notice of Funding Opportunity that came out on May 13th. And we've seen like a slew of webinars, right? The NTIA had almost one a day, and we've been covering these quite actively on Broadband Breakfast and on Broadband Money through our partnership with Broadband.money. We've been reporting on all of these, this series of information that's coming out. And as many of you know, the next step is for states to indicate through a letter of intent that they plan to submit a plan to comply with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I think the latest number was 39. May have to check my own publication, Broadband Breakfast, and see if that number has changed. But there's a just a little less than 3 weeks, by my count, before the states to put in their letter of intent, and then they kick off a process where they're going to be dialoguing with NTIA to submit these proposals, to submit the way that they plan to implement the IIJA, and part of that process is to have state digital equity plans and to have the statewide plan for how broadband funds are going to be deployed within the particular state. Each state has at least 100 million in funds through IIJA, but much more will be available for those that have a large number of underserved, or I should say unserved, that is the technical measure for the deployment of funds, is the unserved counts. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see a real contest to map and measure. This is why the mapping issue that we're going to be talking about next week is so important. It's because it's not just that we need the FCC to bless this deployment program or say this house doesn't have access to broadband. It's really that there's going to be people looking an eagle eye to see if the FCC's map is accurate, right? For example, I was at the Mountain Connect conference about 3-4 weeks ago, and I heard Phil Weiser, actually he's a friend of mine from college. Really happy to see his incredible success and rise as the Attorney General of Colorado. Phil laid out a lot of stuff he's doing on antitrust and privacy. So the thrust of his remarks was really on other topics. But when Phil spoke, I heard something very significant. He basically said that one of the key priorities that Colorado is going to have is to check the maps, right? They're going to have people in their state broadband office who are building their own map to check the FCC's maps, right? Because the FCC's map is going to determine where those additional money beyond the 100 million for each state is going to go. So this is a kind of a way of saying that what we plan to do at least 4 episodes on over the next 2 months is our Summer of Broadband. I am, we could do these live online, or we could do them live in person. And the setup that we've got, we take it to particular cities and locales. We were, as most of you know, we were at Fiber Connect last week. We actually did a pre-recorded one, and then we streamed it live the next day. We hope not to have to do that a lot, but we are willing to do that. And so I guess we're all ears. We're all ears for places that we want to go to, either in person or virtually, and hear from, because we know that state broadband offices are struggling with how they're going to wrap their arms around the data challenge, right? And the Phil Weiser quote that I just mentioned kind of goes to that. They're going to be asked to play a fact-checking role, but also they have a deployment role. They have a literal deployment role in how the money is going to be spent, because this time around, that is to say, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is going direct to the states. So we're going to take a little quick pause here. It's 10 past the hour. For those of you who joined, I'm here. I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia. I'll just show my surrounding here. I'm actually in a park with a looks like a pool over there. Looks like it's just opened up. And we're taking a little pit stop in my trip across the country for personal reasons, but try to fit business in with the personal reasons. And I'm going to be in the Mountain West for most of this summer, and looking to use that as a launching off point for multiple Broadband Breakfast Live online with different states and state entities. And for those of you who are curious, my t-shirt here says Vote Drew Clark. This is the t-shirt I printed when I ran for city council in Orem, Utah, about 5 years ago. Okay, so that was before the latest and current iteration. So now, let me go ahead and share my screen just a little bit here, so that you can see what we're up to. And you know, I have to give real kudos to each of you for being here with us. You know, like you know, from every time we do this, we've been doing this for almost 2.5 years now, every week, with extremely minimal exceptions like Inauguration Day. And our goal is to bring the community of broadband together. We've been, you know, in this mission for longer than that. This is just kind of the latest amplification of it. We did the Broadband Breakfast Club in person, and of course that's where we take our name from. I see a comment, and I want to welcome your comments again. Let's take advantage of this slightly informal occasion to feel free to chime in the comments, or to raise your hand. We can turn you on and you can talk about what's on your mind. I'm going to share my screen so we can talk a little bit about upcoming weeks, and then we'll drill down a little bit more into some of the state broadband efforts. But thank you for your kind comments, Michael. Sure, I see it's a personal note and not a question, but if you do have a question, don't hesitate to chime back on. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen here so everyone can see here. And this is always just a bit of a trick because you want to make sure you're not sharing the wrong screen. Here it goes. So I am now sharing our Broadband Breakfast Live online screen. And as you can see today, we're doing the kickoff for the Summer of Broadband with a little bit of an introduction. Next week, we're going to be talking about broadband mapping and data. I encourage all of you to you know, tune back in. We haven't finalized our list of speakers, but it will build on some of the discussions we've had previously in April, in February, and December, each on broadband mapping and data. And I might add, through our partnership with Broadband.money, I had the chance to interview Lai Olson and Dustin Loop. Lai is from Measurement Lab, and Dustin Loop is from the National Broadband Mapping Coalition. And this was for the Ask Me Anything on Broadband.money last Friday. It was an amazing conversation. We really talked through the ins and outs of broadband mapping. So they are a key resource. They are key nonprofit entities that are having a role in this broadband mapping. There's many others, and we hope to hear from government and for-profit players as well at this next meeting. That's next Wednesday. The Wednesday following, we're going to be talking about the Digital Equity Planning Grant Program, and the deadline for that is coming up quite soon in mid-July. And so we wanted to get this event in on this day. As I said, that was what we were planning to do originally for today, but we switched it just around a little bit because so many of those folks were at the Pew event that's taking place in Ohio today. And going back to the next, this is our tentative schedule. Again, these are always subject to change, but we're going to be doing an episode from Utah on July 13th, an episode from Idaho on July 20th. We have a special discussion on how to value your fiber company in preparing for the IIJA's capital match requirements. That's on July 27th. And then we plan to have a, spoiler alert, a pre-recorded segment because that week I'm going to be in the Grand Tetons. So anyway, that's why Montana is a possibility, and then Tennessee on the ride back to Washington, D.C., and then we'll be in Washington. As always, I do want to make sure to give a shout out to the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast. We would not be able to do what we do without them. Because of our sponsors, we are able to do this program. We're able to bring you the reporting that we do every business day, and of course my connection always slows down at the most inopportune moment. But I see we may have. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen just so I can attend to the audience here. Again, we welcome you. If you'd like to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we can include you in. But I just, like I said, as I do at most events. Okay, I finally have my screen back. So just give me another moment to share my screen here. Share screen. All right. These are the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast: Utopia Fiber, Broadband.money, Broadband Now, Lightbox, Ookla, Pinpoint Capital Advisors, Powerhouse Management, Positron Access, Samsung Electronics America, Connect the Future, and the California Emerging Technology Fund. Very happy for each of the sponsors that we have. Okay, I do see another chat message here. Let's see what we've got here. This is again another personal invite. Thank you for your note, and I will be back in touch with you on your request in that comment. So, okay, Michael, great, wonderful. Thank you for your question. Now, for everyone, Michael Shear asks, do you have any quick reflections on yesterday's opening comments from the Pew event? And I am sorry to say, I did not yet watch the Pew event that started yesterday and is continuing today. We do have a reporter who's covering the event today. Michael, would you be willing to give us a short summary of the event, and then we can spend a few minutes discussing it, if you'd be willing to. It's an open invitation.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I don't have a lot. I mean, Assistant Secretary Donaldson was interviewed, and I think gave some encouragement that we all recognize we're kind of stepping through these processes on a learning as you go basis. But there seemed to be a real emphasis on cooperation, on trying to help people get prepared, helping them get the resources they need to make sure they go through the very ardent requirements for some of these grants, but kind of an assurance that we don't want to leave anybody behind, and we understand that things are maybe not very clear, and we'll try to work harder in the future to make that more understandable for communities and for states how to go about these processes.
I mean, NTIA is clearly in the midst of a very significant ramp up process, right? I mean, this is an agency in which, you know, a 1 or 2 or 3 billion program was a significant program, and now it's dealing with a $42.5 billion program plus a couple more billions scattered around in other pockets. So it has to and is, you know, staffing up to the hundreds. I mean, mind you, I don't have at my fingertips the employee count of NTIA as an agency. I do know that the broadband team was a handful. It was a handful. Now they're ramping that up to the more than 100 range, because they're having at least one person dedicated to each state. So I mean, you know, with the numbers that we're talking about, that's kind of an essential. And again, I think the other key to understanding, piecing this together, it's not a instant program. I mean, this is really more of a 5 to 7 year effort. That's kind of the message. I suppose that's an obvious point, but it's finally sinking in to me, covering this day in, day out for 6-7 months since the passage of IIJA in November, that this is really a plan, a $42.5 billion plan for the next 5-7 years of deployment of broadband, right? And again, and it's not just limited to that, right? I never want to just say, oh, it's only this 42.5. It's much more, because I mean, what we're seeing about the capital match requirements of at least 25%, and many states are likely to be going higher in their numbers of match requirements, or just that people are gonna put forth applications with higher match capabilities, because, you know, the private sector is not being stagnant at all. They are very much a part of this process, and so, you know, 2 takeaways that I'm getting at in my meandering way, Michael, to address your question. One is that NTIA needs to staff up, is staffing up. it's not a, over the next 18-month type of program. It's really a 5-7 years. And that kind of ties into the goal that President Biden set of getting really everyone in America the kind of high quality read 100 by 100 or 100 by 20, 100 megabits per second down, 20 megabits per second up. And really what that's doing, and we saw this at Fiber Connect. And my apologies to those wireless internet service providers that are on the call here. WISP and WISPs have a place. I don't doubt that. But it may be a temporary place, right? Or it may be a place that is just, a stopgap. Because what WISPs should be doing, they have that local connection. They have great relationships. They should be overbuilding themselves, right? They should be planning and preparing to build fiber so that everyone in America has access to that kind of technology. Because 10 years from now, 2033, 2032, you're not going to be wanting to be a city or a community or a county that does not have fiber. You are going to want to have that. You're going to want to have that. So, okay. So to your point, Michael, NTI is ramping up. It's a multi-year process. Fiber is kind of the unashamed choice of the administration, and it seems like many people are rallying behind that. Maybe Congress is the kind of recalcitrant last player that they'll come up and they'll have hearings, and certain members will say, you're excluding technologies. That may be, but I think that it's pretty clear to me as an independent observer of this that we are seeing a move to an extensive fiber deployment.
I might just add. Yesterday, Assistant Secretary Donaldson said that there were now 42 of 56
wonderful
U.S. states that have responded. But he also has pointed out, he said, the two near-term programs for funding, the capital projects and the Digital Equities Act, they've only gotten 2 for the Digital Equity Program. And, I think that's interesting because that's money that is sitting there and is available. And yet I think it demonstrates the difficulty that local communities are having in pairing up and partnering with organizations to take advantage of that.
Thank you for that point, Michael. And that reminds me of 2 other things I wanted to say. And Philip Neufeld, thanks for your question. I want to come to this just now. But Michael, the other point is the numbers of earlier in the call I said 39 was the latest number, so you've updated that to 42. So there's just the 8 more states, or 8 more states plus 6 more territories, because there are 6 territories and districts in the United States, so it's really 56 always is the number to count on. So again, they've got 3 weeks and change, if that, to put in their official letter of intent. What you've also put your finger on there, Michael, is that even though IIJA's BEAD program is the big kahuna, it's really going to be the middle mile and even the Digital Equity Act funds that are going to be sort of shoveled out first, right? And Alan Davidson made that point in one of my interviews with him, the one I did in Mountain Connect in May last month. We talked about how the middle mile programs, that is not state by state, right? That is applied to the NTIA for that $1 billion pot of middle mile money. And it's really on a fast track. That is to say, applications are again, I need to double check the date. Don't want anyone to rely on a date I mentioned here, but I believe it's this calendar year, as opposed to next year, which is what we're looking at on the IIJA funds. All right, Philip Neufeld, and please, we welcome your comments. This for those of you who joined us, it's me, Drew Clark of Broadband Breakfast. I'm here in West Virginia on a pit stop on my drive across the country. We're kicking off what we're calling Summer Broadband. I'm going to do live online and or in-person events in at least 4 states across the country over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we're really kind of paving the way for the role that states are going to play in the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. Okay, so Philip asks or says, WISPs are both a bridge and an overlay network. fiber as proximal as possible. If equitable access means continuity of connectivity across people's daily journey, then fiber alone doesn't fully improve digital inclusion. I appreciate and I admire this point. I think it's a great one. Love to dialogue with you, Philip. Would you like to comment a little more on this point? Feel free to turn on your camera and chime in. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Drew, for all the work you do and the community as a whole. Yeah, and I'll first say people in areas of urban poverty are underrepresented in the FCC and the California Public Utility Commission data. So there's a challenge there, as well as the multi-dwelling units. And so we've got a set of folks who are underserved, but quite frankly, unserved. And because of that, they currently have, copper, but it won't be fiber getting to those homes. And they don't get the experience you and I do have of connecting throughout my daily journey to solve lots of problems and stay connected, right? So we've got to think about how do we also have an overlay network that is wireless. We've actually, as a school district, built out LTE into those neighborhoods as a way to connect those people. And yes, we also need, Drew, to your point, to get fiber there, but quite frankly, the current rules would suggest that they're not going to be served. There's not enough funding or priority going to those areas from a service, as part of this overall transformation that's happening. So we do need to get fiber there, but I think we also need to make sure we've got an overlay network. And then in these areas when fiber is going to take a while to get there, we can't skip another generation of students. I happen to work for Fresno Unified School District, but also for our Fresno County Coalition for Digital Inclusion. We've got to have something that solves quickly and then long-term for that continuity of connectivity when I hope these neighborhoods have fiber. And so, yeah, thanks for pushing for those things.
So restating what I'm hearing you say, Philip, the one point is that the money that we've been talking about here, the 42.5 billion, is not going to cover everyone getting fiber to the home, right? And that's I think a point you're making.
Right.
And so given that it's not, okay, well, how are we going to get them covered with fiber, right? And this is where I come back to my bigger point, which is it's not just 42.5. We got to consider in the private, we got to consider in the state, we got to consider in other ways we're going to get here. But I think you're raising an excellent point, which is to say, what do WISPs need, right? Like, and again, we do have WISPs on this program. I know we have some who complain there aren't enough WISPs, but we do have WISPs on this program, and we would like to have more to speak to this point. And Philip, I don't know if you could speak to this. How do we get that bridge, right? Like, what would be specific ways that WISPs could benefit from, in the short to medium term, say, the ability to get more wireless deployment to those folks until such time as the economics work for a fiber to the home deployment? What are some specifics that you can think of there, Philip?
Well, I'll just say I'm a school district, so anchor institutions are sometimes the best way to get fiber out into different parts of we've got 6,000 square miles in Fresno County. So and we're not getting enough funding short-term, to your point, Drew. So how do you reach? Well, we've got different fiber connections out in these areas. If we said we'll play with a WISP to actually create some network that may long-term be the network unless funding shows up. So there's the rural answer there, right? But there's also the urban answer of we can stand something up short-term. And yes, doggone it, the challenge is there's no regulatory requirement to get fiber from these carriers in areas of poverty. They get to choose. And until that changes from a regulatory standpoint, and until underserved are not treated or walked past, I don't know, even if we had enough funds, if it would show up there. But I'm not a WISP. I respect WISP and I respect the ISPs and the fiber folks. So I'll stand back and hear what others have to say in terms of how we can all work together faster and to create the right, both fiber to a residence standpoint, but also the different services that happen to connect people throughout their daily journey.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks for being willing to turn on the camera and say hello, Philip and Nathaniel. We're going to get him. Feel free to turn on your camera. While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to make the point that, and it's so nice to hear these bells, in the park that I'm sitting at. I think it's vital that we remember that, I'm here on a wireless connection, right? I mean, like, we need to have good 5G deployments. And how do we get good 5G deployments? We get 5G into the neighborhoods, get fiber deeper into the neighborhoods. That's so crucial. But that may not be exactly the point you want to say here, Nathaniel. Tell me a little about who you are and about this point you're making about the BEAD NOFO.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Nathan Smith. I'm with Connected Nation, broadband policy specialist, and we're helping various states with broadband mapping mostly, but moving probably into BEAD consulting in general going forward. Basically, whatever's needed. It's the sort of the moment for us to rise to. Been in business for a while. Formerly, I was the Arkansas State broadband manager, and kind of stood up, wrote rules for, administered the first round of the Arkansas Rural Connect program in Arkansas. So we spent about almost $100 million of CARES funding, getting tens of thousands of Arkansans connected during the early pandemic lockdown. So that's my background. Now, on the BEAD NOFO, I think there's been a little of a misconception that a lot of really deep rural areas are just going to be left behind because the BEAD NOFO is favoring fiber, and there's not enough money to get fiber way out into the deep rural areas. And I think that's just wrong, because what the NTIA really wants is to get internet to every location. That's their top priority. Now, among technologies, they do say fiber seems to be the most future-proof, the most high performance. So if you can, then you should do that. But since they realize that you can't get fiber everywhere with the budget that they have probably, then they have something that's written into the NOFO that called the extremely high cost per location threshold. And that's up to states to define. And the way it works is that if you have multiple projects that propose to serve an area, and some of them are end-to-end fiber and some are not, and they're all under that threshold, then you have to pick a fiber project over fixed wireless or something else. But if the only fiber projects that are on offer are above that threshold, then you are allowed then to go in and say, we'll pick a fixed wireless project that's cheaper over the fiber project that's too expensive. And this should be part of your larger plan. So when you submit the initial proposal sometime next year, and there's all this planning money that's going to flow for the action plan that sort of feeds into that, then what I think the NTIA is going to be looking for is that you've used that threshold and some other features of the program to ensure that you're actually going to get everywhere served. So if you can't get fiber everywhere with the BEAD budget, then use that threshold to sort of exclude some of the highest cost areas from getting that. That's not the right way to put it. Just to economize your budget so that you can get the whole state served any way you can, first of all, and then to the extent that you can upgrade some of that to fiber, that's great. But use that threshold to make sure that you don't just spend all your money on a bunch of high cost fiber projects and leave areas behind. The main thing is to get everybody served. And they've written that into the rules. And I think that point might be being missed.
Well, and we don't want the point to be missed, right? I mean, when we say the administration is showing a preference or a bias, maybe is the pejorative way, for fiber, that does not mean, and they've been very clear, that does not mean, oh, this is all going to fiber. Not at all. In fact, I just put a link in. This is from Broadband Breakfast, the story I wrote about Andy Burke down at Fiber Connect, asked about, are you getting pushback from favoring fiber? He acknowledged we favor fiber, but then he said, the geography of Alaska and the density of Alaska are a lot different from Rhode Island. So, and the point being is that it's up to the state broadband officers to make their decisions. So you're absolutely right, Nathan, that it's not going to be, no can do for fixed wireless deployments, but by no means, right? And there are many scenarios that you've just outlined where this can happen. Thank you for being with us and for giving us your perspective about the Arkansas standing it up. I'd love to connect with you after the call and talk a little bit about Arkansas, because that's again what we're highlighting or promoting here today is just taking the broadband discussion to the states. What are the states doing? How are they reacting? And that's really where it kind of all happens. I mean, as most of you know, I had this opportunity to be a state broadband officer in, let's call it, round one, or state broadband offices round one. I went and stood up an Illinois office of broadband. Now they've gone to much greater and more knowledgeable and at least electorally sophisticated people with Matt Schmidt, a former senator of Minnesota, who's running the Illinois broadband office. But we're seeing a lot of talent in the states, and we saw a lot of folks from state offices at Fiber Connect, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from more of them over the coming weeks at these Broadband Breakfast Live online events. So Nathan, thanks for being with us. We've got Bruce Wolf. Bruce, thank you for being with us today and so many weeks. You've given a lot of comments and chat comments about San Francisco. I assume you're based there. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, what's the weather like in San Francisco? Is it the coldest winter you ever experienced yet?
No, it's not actually. We're having a heat wave right now. It was 91 yesterday. I expect it to be about the same today.
Oh my gosh, that is so uncharacteristic of San Francisco.
It is. So, climate change, have at it. My name is Bruce Wolf. I'm with a small nonprofit in actually just north of San Francisco. And I'm a chief information officer there. But I've been doing work around trying to get a fiber build out in San Francisco for almost 20 years. And the level of politic with Silicon Valley has been kind of, I don't know what you would call it, strangling. I mean, it just is impossible to work over the lobbyists of the incumbents to get anything deployed. So when the original deployments went out under either franchise agreements or the new telecom laws in California, we all got, the competitive rates. We got adequate speeds, but then as the internet and the networks started to grow and content started to get massively heavy, the speeds did not keep up with that. They keep them capped at just enough of what you need at the highest premium. So when we talk about rural areas, when we talk about affordability, I'm there with all of that. But at the same time, I like to call it digital inclusion versus digital divide. And what we have is a lack of inclusion. We're losing it. And so there was a previous speaker here who spoke about leaving out low income and marginalized communities. We still have that here in San Francisco, and a lot of it has to do with the kind of the topography, and nobody wants to dig up over 100 years of ground that might fall apart because it's infill or what have you. But the city has had a plan for almost 20 years to do a fiber deployment that with a design, and it just never has really invested in it.
Well, Bruce, we really should do a program focused on San Francisco, and I've had there about 4 to 8 years ago. I delved somewhat closely into this. It seemed to be kind of moving in a positive direction. Obviously, there have been a lot of other distractions in San Francisco recently, but just what's the quick 30-second version for where this stands right now? Is it officially dead, or is it still in limbo?
It's in limbo. It just is in limbo. I mean, this is not just, I'm just using San Francisco as an example of a significant urban center. I mean, it's not even 1 million residents in 49 square miles, and it has all this focus and high profileness, but it's still, it's happening at cities all over the country. So there is some movement around other things like electric vehicles and local energy generation, but they're going to need a high-speed broadband network in order to monitor all of that. And Absolutely. it's just not there. So it goes beyond just home usage. It goes into everything now. So it's the internet of everything. And I'll stop there.
No, but don't stop just yet, because I want to ask about open access. Okay, and this is something, again, we focused on. We've done a lot of programs. We'll do a lot more on open access. It was a key feature of our digital infrastructure investment conference we had almost 2 months ago in Houston. Open access is the concept that there's one infrastructure, one fiber infrastructure, and there's a network operator. Whether the ownership is by the city or by a private company, you've got one owner of the network. You've got one or multiple, in a collaborative, cooperative, municipal or corporative, one operator, but then multiple ISPs offering services. And in the models that I remember focusing on 4 to 8 years ago and looking at the San Francisco, open access was very much kind of a part of it. Is that, could you just speak to that, Bruce? Do you have any experience in looking at that open access piece?
Yeah, that was at least for the coalition that I had been working with at the time, that was our vision, was that the city would be a city-owned network that would then rent out or lease out space on the network. So you'd have tenants on the network, and you can have all kinds of commercial ISPs or other commercial private networks on there. People can subscribe to, as they do now, for various other services. And folks would have a point of access to this network because the city took the time to invest in fiber to the home or fiber to the premises, where the incumbents are just not, really interested in upgrading their systems in order to provide it. So there's, meanwhile, you have companies like Sonic and that Dane Jasper's company and they just said, we're just going to build it, but it's slow, because of the way the city operates. Bless you. So I agree with you. I think that is the way to go. That there should be municipal networks that are open, that the city can also provide access to residents at a very reasonable cost for general internet access to the web, and they could provide all kinds of tenancy. It's how it could pay for itself. Right. I mean, it's a very simple thing.
No, thank you very much, and appreciate you joining with us, being on our program. For those of you who have just joined, and I see people kind of coming in, and maybe some leaving, but thank you for being here with us. Today is an introduction to what we're calling the Summer of Broadband. We're going to focus on at least 4 separate states in individual programs, live, online, in person, or both, in which we're focusing on what the states are doing as they prepare for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and other broadband programs and projects. There's also points that folks are making here. For example, Philip Neufeld makes a point about Fresno City County. That's great. And I think the other piece that I may kind of build on in some of the comments, and this came out of Fiber Connect too, we are really seeing an acknowledgement that doing a deployment in one part of a city is not going to be favored. That is to say, there might have been a time period where policymakers didn't focus as much on which areas were getting deployed, but there is a real keen appreciation that we need absolutely everyone in a geography to be able to have access to a network. So, for example, Sci-Fi Networks has made a point about this in the various cities that they've deployed, that they are going in, they're doing 100% deployment. It needs to be everyone in the city. Utopia Fiber has recently just announced the completion of West Valley City. Every home in the city, it's actually the second largest, maybe it slipped to third largest city in Utah, and it's now the second largest city in the nation that has a fiber to the home build out to every home, after Chattanooga, which also has that. And this approach of making sure everyone is covered. Everyone's on the build out plan, right? We're not just, targeting certain neighborhoods and not others. And that's one reason why I think the administration is having such a strong focus on the equity access piece of BEAD, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. We are doing a little intro to going to different states. I've mentioned several of the states that we are aiming to go to virtually or in person, and perhaps both. We're also open in this format here to hear from any of you if you'd like to comment. I talked just a little bit about the IIJA, the process. We got an update from the Pew Trust event that took place yesterday evening, and today we've got a reporter covering that event, so you can look for programming on that, for stories on that on Broadband Breakfast later today and tomorrow. And as I say, we're really keen to bring attention to the aspects of broadband infrastructure, the mapping that leads up to it, and the impact and use. And we're going to be talking in detail 2 weeks from today about the Digital Equity Act planning grants and the steps to getting those and tapping into that 2.75 billion, I believe, is the numbers. I'm not a fan of talking for the sake of talking, so I appreciate all of you being with us for this kickoff. If there are any other comments or questions, I'll give you 2 minutes to raise them here in the chat bar. And appreciate your private direct message. Thanks. I'll be in touch about whether I can make those. One of the things we have really enjoyed, I've really enjoyed, but the rest of the Broadband Breakfast team has participated in too, is we've been bringing our show to multiple trade shows. Right, we brought it to Fiber Connect, to Mountain Connect, to the Wireless Internet Service Providers show, to Broadband Communities, and this is kind of an extension of that. We're bringing the show on the road to talk to state broadband leaders. And I guess one more quick point and plug: please go and check out the materials that are available on broadband.money. You can see in these 2 spots. I'm going to shoot in the message bar. Go to this one as well as to this one to read and join the community. We've been putting a lot of material in here, builds on the work we've been doing for years and years at Broadband Breakfast. And this series that we're in right now, Broadband Breakfast Live Online, is a continuation, a discussion forum. Nathan Smith also adds, the digital equity planning grants are difficult to apply for because of the specificity of the budget narrative. That's a great point. Nathan, why don't you shoot me an email offline? We could talk a little bit more about this. And he's also making the point, there's a chicken and egg problem. Can't procure without money, can't get money without the details that emerge from the procurement process. This actually came up in a discussion I had with state broadband leaders. I talked to the Pennsylvania state broadband leaders at Fiber Connect, and they made the point that people keep coming up to them and saying, well, why don't you just hire more people? And they say, excuse me, it's the Georgia leaders. I apologize. I just passed through Pennsylvania, so that's on my mind. But I was talking to the 2 leaders of the Georgia broadband program, and they were saying how many people are saying to them, hey, why don't you just hire more people, right? Well, you can't just hire people in state government, because when you hire one person, you have to, account for this over a long term. So I don't doubt that there's, let me call them bureaucratic obstacles to dealing with this, but the chicken and egg problem does refer to this. Can't procure without money, can't get money without the details that emerge from the procurement process. It's been a wonderful 50 minutes with all of you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing this 50 minutes with us. Next week, we will be back live online for a discussion about broadband mapping and data. And the week following, we're going to be talking about the Digital Equity Act planning grants. And then, as I say, we'll be on the road for the summer of broadband. On behalf of Broadband Breakfast, see you next week. Take care.